The New York Islanders have been on an unbelievable streak, a historic streak for the Islanders, something they have not done in pretty much 30 years. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and a subscribe, and let's take a look at the New York Islanders. So the New York Islanders, a team coming into last season, was projected to be toward the bottom of the NHL, if not at their own tier at the bottom. Coming into this season, expectations were a little bit higher, but this team would regress from last year. They're not that good. They just had a really good run. The Islanders have won 10 games in a row. They're 11-3 to start the season. They started the season 1-3 through the first 4 games, and I was pretty nervous myself for the Islanders. Things didn't look too great for them. They weren't getting a lot of goal scoring, and that was a major issue that was talked about in the over the summer. The Islanders did miss out on Artemi Panarin, possibly in the interest of Matt Duchene as well, and a couple of other guys. And the Islanders struck out on all those guys: Nikolai Ehlers, Patrick Laine, Mitch Marner. They missed out on all those guys, or just weren't able to get things done. So the Islanders kind of had the same group that they did last year. Really, the only main difference being there were a couple of younger guys coming into the lineup as depth. And we did see, obviously, Robin Lehner leave to go to Chicago. But that was really it for the Islanders. It was pretty much the same roster. And more importantly, the same coaching staff. Lane Lambert, as well as Barry Trotz and Pierre Greco and all the goaltending coaches. And the rest of the coaching staff stayed with the Islanders. And that was a huge difference maker. The only exception being Scott Gomez, who was the power play coach. But he has now been replaced by Toronto's former power play coach. So anyway, since that 1-3 start the season, just going game by game through this 10-game now winning streak for the Islanders. They started things off a Saturday night. They were giving up replica Stanley Cup rings from the 81 team, I think, or maybe the 82. I don't remember. But they were giving out Stanley Cup rings for that game as a promotion. Saturday night game at home against the Florida Panthers. The Islanders would be down in that game, would come back, beat the Florida Panthers 3-2 in a shootout, and things looked pretty good. I believe Brock Nelson got a goal. The Islanders had a lot of good things happening in that game. And then the next Monday, the New York Islanders would play a matinee game on Columbus Day at 1 o'clock. They played the St. Louis Blues at the Coliseum. The Islanders were down 2-0 late in the third period, would come back. We saw yet again Brock Nelson get on the board. Oliver Wahlstrom's first game with the Islanders. And the Islanders came back, tied the game, a late goal by Matt Barzal that was deflected in off a Blues player, went past Binnington. The Islanders would tie that game, and then Devon Toews in overtime would get the winner. The Islanders won that game against the Blues. And this, as much as the game against the Florida Panthers, started the winning streak, this game against the St. Louis Blues seemed to be the real turning point for the Islanders, because even in the Florida game, there seemed to be a little bit of frustration with the scoring at certain points. They probably felt like they could have put up more. They were playing kind of lousy, and then even into the Blues game, they were falling asleep most of the game, and they just found something clicked late in that third period. The Islanders tied the game and won, and now, since then, they have won all these games, and I feel like that Blues game, obviously I attended that game, but you could just feel, even, just in the stadium, you could feel something changed during that game. Maybe it happened in the Florida game. There have been, things about the Islanders, what was the turning point for this? Obviously, you could say the first game being the Florida game, but this really felt like the game and the moment that really turned things around for the Islanders. So after that, then they had a little road trip. They beat the Winnipeg Jets and the Columbus Blue Jackets. Again, the Blue Jackets game, they didn't look overly solid, and Barry Trotz was very adamant about that in the post-game interviews. He was very upset with how the Islanders played, specifically coming out into that third period. They looked very slow, gave up 7 shots in the first 3 minutes or something crazy. And the Islanders looked pretty bad, but again, Barry Trotz was able to keep them focused and realize, listen, we're winning games, but we're not winning the way that we should be winning. We're not winning the way that we want to. So then they would head back home, beat the Coyotes. They would head up to Ottawa in a physical game against the Senators. Some would argue that may have been a distraction game by Ottawa, throwing Matt Martin into the bench. A couple of scuffles here and there. Something toward the end of the game where Tkachuk was going after Cizikas, who obviously did not want to fight, isn't a huge fighter. So that was, definitely not forgotten as we get later on into what happened actually last night. But then the Islanders would play one of their crosstown rivals, the Philadelphia Flyers, win that one pretty convincingly against the Flyers. Then this seemed to be one of the tougher parts of the schedule this whole season for the Islanders, especially coming early into the season. The Islanders had a back-to-back at home against the Tampa Bay Lightning, and then going up to Buffalo to play the surging hot Buffalo Sabres in Buffalo. So the Islanders found a way to beat the Tampa Bay Lightning. Things were pretty tight up until the end. The Islanders were able to get the win in that one. But then they would go up to Buffalo, a very good team, and they were able to just squeak a weird goal in. And Derek Brassard, from the Ottawa game to now, has a 5-game goal streak or point streak. I believe it's a goal streak, actually. That was actually snapped last night. But Derek Brassard was on fire through this, scoring that lone goal in that game. Unfortunately, he did not score last night against the Ottawa Senators. But the Islanders once again won 4-1 against Ottawa. So they've played some pretty tough teams. You look, Winnipeg's a pretty solid team. St. Louis Blues, the defending Stanley Cup champs, I'd say they're a pretty decent team as well. Arizona, arguably one of the better teams in that Pacific Division. They played Ottawa twice, who seems very desperate. And they're actually playing decent hockey. They beat up on the Rangers the night before. So again, it's a theme, and not only the Islanders getting goal scoring from up top and depth scoring from guys like Derek Brassard, who was on a 5-game goal streak. You're also seeing Ross Johnson score. Cole Bardreau score his first NHL goal on a penalty shot last night. Oliver Wahlstrom, don't necessarily think he's scored yet, but he's playing good hockey. Anders Lee up front. Obviously, Matt Barzal. So the Islanders are finding goal scoring throughout that lineup. The defense has been solid. They have that great system that Barry Trotz has implemented, and it seems to be carrying over from last year into this year. Adam Pelech has looked fairly solid as well, a guy that I definitely have my issues with, but he is especially last night against Ottawa. Actually, Butch Goring even said how well he played in that game, and the Islanders definitely are looking like a team that is going to be an issue for other teams in that Metropolitan Division. So the offense is good. The defense is good. Well, let's talk about the goaltending for a minute here as well, because that has been very solid as well. Looking at the goals against average, the Islanders have the two in both goaltenders. The 1A, 1B option seems to be working for the Islanders because both their goaltenders are in the top 10 for goals against average. Thomas Greiss sits at number 4 with only 2 goals against per game throughout his starts this year. Semyon Varlamov is 8th in that category with a 2.14. So very solid numbers by both goaltenders for the Islanders. They're both on unbelievable winning streaks. I think they each have 3 or 4, if not 5-game winning streaks, each of them at this point. So the Islanders are just finding a way to get things. Things are clicking right now. There was a little bit of frustrations, I think from in between the Winnipeg and the up until the Flyers game. It was about 3 or 4 games in this winning streak where things definitely could have taken a turn. They got frustrated. The Islanders were having issues with penalties and the officials at certain points, and it was getting to their head, and it really could have been a distraction, but they didn't let it bother them. They kept going. I'm sure Barry Trotz knew how to execute that issue in the locker room, so good on Barry Trotz. And looking ahead now, the next 3 games, the Islanders are home. So they're on a 10-game winning streak. They have 3 games at home. To be frank, they're not all at the Coliseum, which is a shame, but that's how it is for right now. But anyway, the Islanders play the Pittsburgh Penguins. Their first matchup against the Pens since last year when they swept the Penguins in the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs. The Florida Panthers, this was the team that they beat to start this 10-game winning streak. And to end the homestand, the New York Islanders welcome in John Tavares, Mitch Marner, and Austin Matthews to the Coliseum to play the Islanders. So that could be very interesting if the Islanders have a 12-game winning streak at that point. That's something to keep an eye on. I know no one would love more to spoil the Islanders' winning streak than number 91 in Toronto. So basically, with that, the Islanders are home pretty much. They've had three of the last four games have been at home for the Islanders, which is very good. And they have these 3 games here against Pittsburgh, Florida, and Toronto. Their next road game is November 16th, which is 10 days away. So it's more than a week before the Islanders have to go on another road trip. And that's to Philadelphia, so that's not even a far trip. But the Islanders are definitely, they are playing some very good hockey right now. Let's hope this keeps up. Let me know what you guys think of the Islanders. Who do you think is really overperforming? Expectations that we probably didn't have for them. I would say Cole Bardreau has played really solid hockey. And the Islanders continue to have some guys getting called up. We saw Otto Koivula called up against the Buffalo Sabres. We saw Seth Helgeson and Koivula called up. Koivula was called up yet again, as well as Seth Helgeson yesterday. So the Islanders have a lot of depth. They're testing that depth. Unfortunately, the Bridgeport Sound Tigers aren't doing as well as I think the Islanders would have hoped. But they have a pretty solid team down there, and the guys are coming right up and finding success in the NHL. So Brent Thompson's doing a pretty good job for all the flack that I give him, and as much as I don't really love Brent Thompson, he's done a pretty good job as the head coach in Bridgeport. So let me know what you guys think. Answering the question down below, what do you think of the Islanders? Who do you think is performing out of this world right now? Thank you for watching. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and a subscribe, and I'll talk to you again soon.